Okay, we are talking about the interplay of the anxiety and panic disorder and opioid use and in general substance use disorder. And that's my credential, that's my disclosure. As you see, do not and nor is highlighted, so I don't have any financial disclosure. Psychiatric is here. Today objective is anxiety disorder diagnosis, anxiety disorder treatment, and substance use and anxiety disorder in general. Hopefully we can get through this one in 15 minutes. Anxiety disorder belongs to the really most frequent psychiatric disorder. As you see, panic disorder is one, general anxiety disorder, social anxiety, specific phobia, selective mutism, and separation anxiety disorder is the one that we talk about today. Panic disorder. I'm not going to read through all this, but one thing that is important in panic disorder is the recurrent unexpected panic attacks with one S at the end. And also I highlighted some of those symptoms. I want you to remember those symptoms because it comes handy when we are talking about the substance use in general. As you can see, anxiety disorder and a panic disorder is a surge can occur from a calm state to an anxious state. And there are some symptoms that the patient's supposed to come with and give us those symptoms and sign that as a physician, we come up with the diagnosis. And unfortunately, sometimes the diagnosis is made by the patient and they come and they say, I have a panic attack. And then the diagnosis is going to be signed off by the physician as a panic disorder. But as you can see, palpitation, sweating, and shaking, and sensation of the shortness of the breath, nausea, and abdominal distress are five of those symptoms that the patient may come up with. And all is required in general is only four of these symptoms appear among all these 13 different symptoms to make that diagnosis. But I want you also to pay attention to number four, which is says that this is not going to be a physiological effects of the substances or another medical condition. So that's very important part of this situation, as well as the panic attack does not occur in other anxiety disorder that we've just listed up there. A panic attack can happen on a patient that had a history of the trauma and is suffering from the post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the exposed to or something that remind that trauma events for them. That panic attack can happen on that situation. That patient should not be diagnosed with the panic disorder. The same thing goes with the patients with the obsessive compulsive disorder or social anxiety, for example, that would be a different diagnosis in general. So we pay attention to that. General anxiety disorder also is excessive anxiety and worry. So as you can see, anxiety is a symptoms, is not a diagnosis on this one. But it does have something to do with the symptoms that the patient comes with the restlessness as one of them, muscle tension, sleep problem. As you can see, lots of patients with anxiety disorder would complain about their sleep disorder as well. So, but the duration of the symptoms is very important. Those anxiety and worry, the excessive, has to be lasting most of the day of the week for at least 6 months in order to make that diagnosis. And as you can see again, on this one, on number 5, it says the disturbance should not be a physiological effect of the substance or any medical condition to make that diagnosis. So if we have also anxiety disorder with the other diagnoses such as social anxiety disorder can be, involved, then that anxiety is not a general anxiety disorder. With these two diagnoses, we kind of know what is the symptoms of the someone with the anxiety will present itself to us. So we try to see what is the relationship with the anxiety and panic attack in other settings, such as social anxiety disorder. Social anxiety disorder is and these are all came from the DSM-5, so I'm not going to read through all of them because it's mainly you can find it by accessing DSM-5. But in general, the fear and anxiety in a social situation is the one that is clearly causes the social anxiety. If someone has performance anxiety, such as, for example, presenting right now, to you, it may cause some anxiety for the person who is presenting because they are in front of the other people. Usually they specify as a performance anxiety. But look at the fear and anxiety that comes. There are a difference between the fear and anxiety, and we get to it. What is the difference between fear and anxiety in general? But still, number 9, if you look at it, it says it should not attributable to the physiological effect of the substance. So you see that all this anxiety disorder that we are talking about, it's always clearly says that there is some relationship between the substance use and those symptoms. And so we need to jot out that one before we come up with the diagnosis of the anxiety. And also, there are some medical problems can cause the symptoms that the patient comes with the anxiety symptoms needs to be ruled out. And the fear and anxiety or avoidance is not better explained by the symptoms of another mental disorder. Panic disorder can have anxiety symptoms. Body dysmorphic disorder is one of those really diagnoses that may cause the performance anxiety as well. If someone is anxious to present because they do have some body dysmorphic disorder, and that would be a diagnosis for the patient, not the anxiety disorder or social anxiety in general. A specific phobia, as the name represents, is usually related to some specific things like animal, natural environment. Some people have a specific phobia about the needles and invasive medical procedure. We certainly should also rule out if that anxiety comes from the previous traumatic experience that they may had with this particular event or things. If someone been bit by a dog, they may have a anxiety when they see a dog. That would be a PTSD, most likely, not the anxiety as a result of the specific phobia. So it's a very important to be able to get the information from the patient that where this anxiety started, how long this anxiety is last, and what other stuff may be attached to these anxiety symptoms in general in order to come up with the diagnosis of this situation of anxiety. Selective mutism, it's usually for those people that they do have in one special situation, they won't be able to speak, but they can speak in other situations. So those are also very important to get the information. But this disturbance also has a limitation. At least it has to be a month. So the duration of the month is very important to get the length of the time that we have this problem. There are some other psychiatric problems that may create the mutism, such as the schizophrenia, any psychotic disorder or autism spectrum. So we need to rule out those places for the making this diagnosis as well. Now, separation anxiety disorder, again, the name reflects what the meaning of it is, but I would like also to highlight some of those symptoms that the patient may experience, such as headache, stomachache, nausea, or vomiting. And those are very important to remember that these could be the symptoms of the different disease. And it's not going to reflect the separation anxiety if those are the symptoms, only symptoms that the patient comes in with. But this stress is experienced when they are separated from some particular attachment that they had in their life. From the kids, if it's you're treating someone, sometimes the separation is from the parents, sometimes is an object, separation from an object or a place, and that could be something that we need to consider. So you guys have access to these slides, and I think that you would simply can read through it and recognize that. And now, anxiety disorder, it does have lots of features that includes fear and anxiety. Fear is an emotional response to the real or perceived imminent threat. And anxiety is anticipation of the future threat. So these are having some overlap, but those are very important to be able to separate from each other. Now, I found this one is very interesting. In Germany, the treatment of the social phobia, panic disorder, and general anxiety disorder has some guidelines. And I found these guidelines, and if you look at the substances that was used, this medication that were used is mainly SSRI, SNRI, MAO inhibitors, tricyclic, and some anticonvulsant and anxiolytic medication, which is a tricyclic also, and the buspirone. There is no mention of the benzodiazepine among all this medication when it's a guidelines. Not that they don't use the benzodiazepine, but this is a long-term treatment of the disease for all those diagnoses that we just talked about. And none of those long-term treatment includes the benzodiazepine. But if we were in the same room, I would ask you guys to raise your hand that how many patients you encounter in your practice that they claim that they had anxiety disorder and they've been prescribed benzodiazepine for 20 years, 10 years, 15 years, and they can't do it without it. Now we want to take a look at what is the anxiolytic or hypnotic sedative use disorder. And the symptoms are clear, and the same thing goes for any substance use. We should have the longer time or larger amount of the time required to get the same kind of the effect, the use of the medication, the desire to cut down, and the great deal of time spent to activities to achieve that particular substance, craving, and also effect of the substance use on their performance in a daily basis, as well as the use of the substance despite of some damage that or physical hazardous situation that they use that, such as driving an automobile as a result of the that may get in trouble, and the tolerance and withdrawal in general when they use the medication or they don't use the medication they may experience. So that's pretty much general for most of the substance use criteria in DSM-5. Now, in withdrawal, as you mentioned, I mentioned to you that to remember those symptoms, the symptoms of the withdrawal from the anxiolytic and sedative are pretty much the same as somehow my computer decided to switch the. Do you guys still have my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so you see that the sweating, tremor, you remember the shaking that we had on anxiety disorder, insomnia, problem with the sleep, nausea, vomiting, psychomotor agitation, and anxiety. All of those symptoms could be as a withdrawal from the substances that we prescribe for the patient, and now they are withdrawing from it, and therefore they come up with the anxiety disorder. So we have a patient that was prescribed the anxiolytic, such as benzodiazepine, and they took it for a long period of time. Now they come to you and they are claiming that they have anxiety disorder, but clearly they may have a withdrawal from what was happening. So caffeine intoxication, sometimes we don't pay attention for that one. There are only 5 of these 12 symptoms is required to make that diagnosis. Restlessness, nervousness, excitement, insomnia, muscle twitching, rambling flow of thought and speech, tachycardia, palpitation. You remember the first one when we talk about psychomotor agitation. So all of this can be as a result of the intoxication of the caffeine. How many times we ask the patient how much caffeine need to drink, they drink. And we have patients that they come in with those Red Bull in their hands, and we know that how much caffeine could be on those kind of the product, and it can cause the problem. Alcohol withdrawal also another things that we need to pay attention. As you can see, that sweating, tremor, insomnia, nausea, vomiting, psychomotor agitation, anxiety, same as the benzodiazepine. All those, symptoms could be a problem. Now, if you look at the recent national survey of the drug use and health, you can see that they categorize several medication listed as a tranquilizer: alprazolam, lorazepam, clonazepam, diazepam, cyclobenzaprine, a muscle relaxant, and Soma, another muscle relaxant, is also listed as the tranquilizer. Now, there are some Z drugs for the sleep, as well as the barbiturate, that the antimazepam, and that is pretty much some of those medication that is routinely prescribed, and there are scheduled as a controlled substance, some of them. And how bad is the problem is in this slide. As in 2018, 2019, just put the 30 in front of all this number. Tranquilizer and sedative use in 2018 and 2019 are pretty much close. 6.5 million people, they were using this medication or this kind of the product. It's a 6 million people around this nation, at least in this study, that they are using benzodiazepine, and it's a huge problem that sometimes it's in the shadow of the opioid use disorder, which we know that the opioid use and the benzodiazepine use, both of them makes the problem even bigger when we have a patient in both of those substances. And there are some statistics, I put it there, and you can go there and take a look at it. These are all standard errors of the numbers. It's always in 1,000. The numbers, standard error when it's smaller means that the curve is pretty much sharper on our standard evaluation. And you can see that there are not too much difference between the genders and in different age, and also from the race and also education level. The lower the education is, the higher the problem shows in this situation. And these are just a statistic if someone wants to see that how bad is the problem. And looking at the numbers here with the standard errors of the numbers in thousands, in 2018 and 2019, it clearly shows that we do have a real problem in hand. So I put all those slides here, and the sake of the time, you just can take a look at it, or you can go straight to their website and get the full kind of the information that we need for our future, plan how to approach. And these are my references. And of course, this is a big, subject to talk about, but in 20 minutes, that's as much as I could share. And with that, I am done.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kamran, so much. That was wonderful. Actually putting together some things for me that I was like, oh, okay, that's actually really helpful. Questions from anyone about the talk we just had from Kamran? And Norton, don't forget, you can definitely put in any questions or comments you have in the chat box and we'll get those. So if you guys do, go ahead and use that functionality. One of the things that I love about the group we have for your hub team, for your ECHO, is just all the different perspectives that we bring between Meredith with her psychology background, Kamran with his psychiatry, me with family medicine. We've got Rick and Melissa Brian and Melissa sort of holding down the fort between coordinating all the stuff we do and making certain that it works well when we get together. Is with Rick and what he brings, he kind of fills in a lot of, he's like some of the mortar between our bricks and what we do. And he provides all that yummy literature for us to peruse. And if you guys didn't notice it in your chat, he put up 2 different articles for us. Prevalence of comorbid substance use, anxiety, and mood disorders in epidemiological surveys, and then relationship between anxiety disorders and opiate dependence. So if you haven't gotten into your chat box yet, copy those and save them so you can go and look at them later. And your hub team is also available to you in between our ECHO sessions. So I think Melissa sometimes puts our contact information up in the chat box. So if you can do that today, Melissa, that would be great. So if questions come up or you've got like, I really want to find something about this and I can't find anything in my searches for scholarly material, any literature, Rick's your man for that. But if you have other questions that come up about management of patients or just want to bounce something off of you, our emails will be provided in the chat and you can reach